Good afternoon, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Harbours Subcommittee. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be made available for viewing through our Council's website. Remote participants, please follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off your video when you're not addressing the meeting. Writing speak in the Teams chat function when you want to contribute. If you're in a hall, you can do this on your iPhone or iPad, or just give me a wee wave. Please don't repeat contributions already made by other members, and no material should be posted in the chat function if it is intended as part of the discussion. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. If any member has to leave the meeting, please either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time or write leave in the Teams chat function and then join when you rejoin the meeting, so we can keep track of whether the meeting is quorate. All members should speak clearly and directly into the microphone when making contributions, and when referring to reports, please provide reference to the relevant page and paragraph to allow everyone to follow. Please focus contributions on areas where clarification is required or to propose an alternative to a recommendation. We have several important reports to consider today, and I anticipate we will deal with the business in our usual efficient manner. So the first item is the sediment. Tracy, can you provide the sediment and any apologies, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. We've got 4 members present in total, 2 members present in the Council chambers at Kirkcudbright, being the Chair and Councillor Hagman, 2 members present on Teams, being Councillor Brodie and Councillor Malcolm Johnston. Not present at the start of the meeting is Councillor Giusti, and we've got apologies from Councillor Ingalls. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and I approve of remote participation. Item 2, declarations of interest. Katie?
Sorry, Chair. Can I just ask? I'm just looking at the membership, and we're going through the sediment and apologies. My understanding, and it's more of a governance question, is that proportionality was being used in terms of the makeup of the committee, and there doesn't appear to be any members from the Labour group. Is that an error? I'm just a bit confused as to why we've got 3 from the Conservatives, 2 from the SNP and 1 independent, but nothing from the Labour group when it's proportionality. But Tracy maybe has an answer.
That's an interesting one, Tracy.
Thank you, Chair. There was a Labour representative, which was Councillor Whitelaw. So there's a vacancy, but that will be, the membership will be updated following the by-election next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any members have any declarations of interest they'd like to make? Nope. Item 3, delegation to Harbours Subcommittee, report by Head of Governance and Assurance. Tracy's here to assist if members have any questions, so I'll open it up to debate. Does anyone have any questions? Nope. So moving on to the recommendations, members are asked to note the remit of the Harbours Subcommittee is detailed at 3.2. Happy to note? Yep. Thank you. Item 4, Harbours Service, presentation on the Port Marine Safety Code, responsibilities for the duty holder, report by the Interim Head of Roads and Infrastructure. William Heaps and James MacLeod are here to assist if members have any questions. So I'll open it up to debate. Nope. Do you have any comments to make, James or William?
So I've got a presentation to give, if you'd like me to do that, Chairman.
Yep. Recommendations, they're asked to agree to receive a presentation by the designated person, that's you, William, of Marico Group on our responsibilities as duty holder in terms of the Port Marine Safety Code. Happy to agree?
Chair, can I suggest that we've received the presentation, and then if there's any questions, we can ask questions after the presentation?
Yep.
Would that be appropriate?
That's the way of doing it, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, agree to receive, yeah. Okay, so item 5 then, that's the report by the designated person on the Port Marine Safety Code. Well, no, sorry, that's the audit. Did we just go straight to the report then from William now? Yep. Oh, you've got it. There you go. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. So I've got a shortened presentation. It's a presentation that has been given in slightly varying forms a number of times before. I was going to deliver it back in September, but a number of members couldn't join us then. So I'm going to give this presentation now, and has been suggested questions at the end is probably appropriate. But if there's burning questions on the way, please, I'm very happy to accept them. So, was that me or no? So, as it says on this slide, an introduction refresher. So I believe everybody who's actually attending the meeting today has had some form of training already. So please accept this as a refresher, and if I'm teaching you things you already know, please accept that just as a reminder rather than any accusation that you didn't know or have forgotten. So very, very quickly, open port duty. If you or your organisation has the privilege of operating a harbour, in return for that right or privilege, you must keep that port open to anybody who wants to use it for the shipping and unshipping of goods and passengers, or for leisure users or whatever. So it must be open to users. So in short, you must provide access to your port to anybody who wants to use it. But, and there's always a but, isn't there? That's in return for them paying you reasonable dues and abiding by reasonable regulations that you may set, so that that can happen fairly for everybody. I think it's important to note that once you've got that right or duty, usually acquired through an Act of Parliament deep in the mist of time, it's very difficult to dispose of that right, and it's something that you have to live with, and you have to discharge your duties forevermore until you can get the law changed. So this presentation is on the Port Marine Safety Code. You'll see the acronym PMSC coming up time and time again. The Port Marine Safety Code is a set of advice put together by the government, and it came from the Sea Empress disaster in Milford Haven back in 1996. So that was a very large tanker that fetched up on the rocks in Milford Haven and spilt oil everywhere. And to be fair, there's a bit of confusion on the part of port authorities and everybody else about what should be done. And in order to correct that, the Port Marine Safety Code was put together and introduced only 4 years later in March 2000. That code was joined a few years later by an accompanying guide, which gave a lot more detail on how the code should be used, and good advice and guidance to harbour authorities and harbour masters. So those two documents, current versions are November 2016 for the code itself and February 2018 for the accompanying guidance. I think in simple terms, the code is for you, the duty holder, the members of this committee. That the code tells you what you should be doing. The guidance is for your officers, helping them put the policy and procedures in place. Harbour authorities should confirm to the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency every 3 years that they comply with the code. And in your own policies, you say that you will do that. That next compliance exercise is due in March 2024. So those of you who've been on the committee for a while will remember that you sent a letter in 2021 confirming compliance. You can expect the Maritime Coast Guard Agency to make checks on ports around the country every so often that you are compliant. They aim to do 8 such checks every year. Now, when you bear in mind that there's 500 and something ports around the UK, the chances of them alighting on you on chance are rather low. But of course, they tend to focus on ports where there have been reported problems, or they have suspicions things aren't right. So there's always that threat that the MCA will come and check on you. And to help other ports, every year the MCA would normally publish an annual report saying what they've been finding in their checks and highlighting any common findings or concerns. I have to say that report hasn't appeared this year. It did appear last year after a bit of a gap. But it's a useful document when it does come out. There's the two documents. I always have a bit of a laugh about this. The one on the left is the Port Marine Safety Code. The one on the right is the Guide to Good Practice. And I always say, I wish they'd chosen two different pictures. At least you could tell them apart. But they're very, very different documents. They look very similar. I certainly recommend that members of this committee have access to the Port Marine Safety Code, and I believe that has been distributed in the past. So if new members haven't got a copy, please make sure you ask for one. They're both living documents in theory. The intention is that they're updated every few years. Like many organisations, the MCA has been struggling with recruitment and keeping people in post. And after a bit of a gap, there was a new ports and policy, a VTS policy manager appointed a few years ago. Only I have to report, having just put this presentation together, he's just resigned. So once again, there's nobody at the MCA leading this department. I think that will be a temporary gap, but let's wait and see. And just as we're in Scotland, just to note that the Port Marine Safety Code is not a devolved matter. It's something that you have to apply whichever of the countries, the UK, you are in. So the basic concepts of the code, split into 5 really. The code expects that there will be a duty holder, somebody who's responsible for safety of all operations within harbours. So the duty holder for the 5 harbours in Dumfries and Galloway is this subcommittee. The first item on the agenda that you quickly went over confirmed that that is so and why. Secondly, you must appoint what is known as a designated person, somebody to provide assurance to you as the duty holder that things are going to plan. Your designated person is me, William Heaps. I'm independent from the council. I work for a consultancy, and I've been appointed by the council to provide that role. I'll tell you a bit more about that role later on. The next thing you must have is risk assessment-based management. So what that means is that whatever you do to run your harbours safely must be based on an assessment of what could go wrong. If it goes wrong, what will be the consequences, and then putting in control measures, putting in procedures and controls in place to make sure that any outcome is as low a consequence as possible. So assess the risks, keep people safe. In order to do that, you'll have some procedures and systems and forms and paperwork that's collectively known as a safety management system. And it's essential that you have one of those, that it's kept up to date and it's used. And the 5th basic concept is you're running a port for the benefit of your customers, and especially municipal ports like your own, for the benefit of stakeholders, the community, and you should talk to those people and take their views into account. So I'm going to quite quickly, hopefully more quickly than in previous times, go through some of the more detail of the code. So in addition to those 5 basic principles, the code can be divided into 10 key areas. And if you address those 10 key areas, you'll be well on the route to full compliance. So I will reiterate this statement. If committee members read no other part of the code, I draw your attention to page 5, which is a double-page spread, a nice little document, a pictogram. What does the Port Marine Safety Code mean for harbours? This is it. I'm not going to read it all out. You can look at it in the code itself. But it's got those 10 key areas, tells you what you must consider, what you must make sure is in place for your harbours, and in very few words, what you need to do to ensure your organisation is compliant. Who does the code apply to? Well, anybody that runs anything that could be remotely considered a marine terminal, port, harbour, jetty, even marinas. But in particular, it applies to competent harbour authorities, those that provide pilotage, which you don't. Municipal, port and local authorities, that's definitely you. and it also applies to trust ports and private harbours and so on. But it most definitely applies to you. You have accepted that, and you have a policy stating your acceptance of that, and that you will run your harbours safely. Does this code have teeth? Well, I always liken the code to the highway code. It's not legislation in itself, so you can't be prosecuted for breaking the highway code, but you can most certainly be prosecuted for speeding and be prosecuted under the Road Traffic Act. So like the highway code, the Port Marine Safety Code brings together other existing legislation and guidance and policies. So as it says there, failure to comply with the code is not an offence in itself, but if you haven't followed the advice in the code, a link can be made in court, and you, as a duty holder, as this committee, can be held liable for failure to comply. And there's precedent for this. So there was a case on the Clyde a number of years ago where resulting in fatalities aboard a tug that was towing a large ship. The tug capsized and sadly some people drowned. And as a result of that, the Harbour Authority received fines up to £650,000, which is, in anybody's book, significant. You'll be able to see the detail of these slides later on. But the prosecution there were under the Health and Safety at Work Act. And the judge, in his summary, pointed out that you, the Harbour Authority, in your case, the Harbour Subcommittee, did fail to do these things. So that included making sufficient risk assessments, failing to provide safe systems of work, failing to have plans in place, failing to have a full safety management system, and failing to have a designated person. And all those things taken into account led to this fine and lost reputation, of course. So a lot of people say, well, does this apply to me? You know, things don't go wrong in our little harbours, but accidents really do happen. So the four on the left, they're not going to be worrying you in Kirkcudbright or Port William. But the ones on the right, top right, is a fishing boat that capsized on a quay it's actually Dartmouth in the southwest. But if you close your eyes and squinted slightly, that's not a very different picture from looking at Kirkcudbright. Long straight quay, fishing boat alongside, capsized. Fortunately, nobody injured or killed in that case, but significant oil pollution and a really big mess for somebody to clear up afterwards. The bottom right, good few years ago, back in 2000, was a small coaster turning in a narrow river. Again, not unlike Kirkcudbright. You have had coasters that size here in the not too distant past. And the coaster got stuck with the aft end on a muddy bank on the other side of the river. Couldn't turn, the tide fell, and it broke its back, and the harbour was blocked for months, and there was oil everywhere and a lot of embarrassment. So it can happen. And things like this can happen. This was Storm Emma only 3 years ago, and that's actually Holyhead. But that could have been Stranraer if the wind had been slightly different. And somebody would be responsible for making sure people were safe, making sure that was cleared up, and putting it right. I think I'm also bound to mention that very recently there was an incident very, very close to home for you, just outside Port William. And it was just outside by about 50 metres. Now, had that been 50 metres away, it would have been an incident that you would have been managing. You would have been responsible for the oil pollution clear up and management of the event itself. Now, very quickly, the police would come in and helped, but it was very, very close to home, that one. So it just shows that things can happen. Okay, so I've rattled through there, Chairman. I'm just going to very quickly go through some of the operational items. So before you all get very, very worried, as a Harbour Subcommittee, your duty is to put in place policy and procedures to enable other people to run these harbours safely. So operationally, you have a marine team who will put together a safety management system and will manage the harbours for you. The guide to good practice is split into 13 sections that you see on the screen now. And that's really about operating the harbour safely. But I'm going to just give you a little bit more detail on the first two items, the legal background to running a port, and especially the accountability of the duty holder, because that's you. So if you'll bear with me, I'll rattle through those two, and then hopefully there'll be some questions. So the code requires that there should be an understanding of local legislation. And in fact, we're going to hear a bit more about this at the end of the meeting in respect to the Harbour Revision Order for Stranraer. But there's an expectation that you will understand the local acts of Parliament that established your harbours. You'll understand the area they cover, which is very pertinent to the Stranraer question, the powers they give you, and they give you quite a few powers that over and above normal council powers, and they enable you to raise money to finance the harbours. Though that local enabling legislation can only be changed by harbour revision orders or other local legislation. And it may also give you the right to create further legislation, for example, through the making of bylaws or through the making of directions. And there are various types of directions that can be made. It's really important that the legislation should be known by relevant officers and by yourselves as a committee, and it should be clearly signposted for the safety management system. And your safety management system does signpost the legislation very well. So again, have a look at that. Now, harbours have been around for a great many years, hundreds of years, and there's no one piece of overriding legislation. But the starting point to look at is that enabling act, which I've spelt wrong on that slide, for each individual harbour. So there's a list there of some of the UK legislation that may apply to harbours. There's also international legislation, so shipping is a very international business, the International Maritime Organisation, International Association of Lighthouse Authorities, and so on, also have legislation that has to be adhered to. Of course, there's European legislation as well, like the Water Framework Directive, and this is, as you'll all be aware, being currently replaced by national legislation. For example, the Environment Bill that came in last October. But that European legislation still exists, even if under a different name. And then, locally, there's bylaws, and you have bylaws in effect in Kirkcudbright. They're not often used, but they're there. I don't think Stranraer currently has effective bylaws, but you do have the right to make them, as far as I remember. And then the other thing we mustn't forget is health and safety and other everyday legislation that affects all of us in our daily lives. So there's a whole raft of it, and it needs to be understood. Somebody, therefore, has to be accountable for making sure that that legislation is sensibly and effectively used, and that users of the harbours are kept safe. So the last section of this is on accountability. So who is ultimately accountable for safe operations in 5 harbours in Dumfries and Galloway? And the answer is the duty holder, this harbour subcommittee. So the code is that national standard against which your performance is measured, and you should make a clear published commitment to comply with the code and set down the policies that you want your officers, the harbour master and his team, to implement. Now, you have made that policy statement. It's very clear. It's published on your website. And again, sorry, I'm going to wait. And again, if you haven't read it recently, I recommend you do so. So, as I've said, the duty holder is normally the combined members of the Harbour Board, in your case, the Harbour Subcommittee. And the code is very clear that you are collectively and individually accountable. It's also clear that you may not abdicate responsibility on the grounds that you do not have particular skills. So there's no expectation that you're all master mariners or expert harbour masters. But it is clear that if you're not, you can't abdicate responsibility. It's clear you require training, which is why you're listening to me, yet again. It's very important to be reminded of what you need to know. And the code is also cognizant of municipal port issues. So there is a recognition that as elected members, you have other responsibilities. It realises that over election periods, there may be times when it's more difficult to act as a committee than it might be otherwise. And it also makes recommendations on the makeup of your committee. So one possibility you might consider is having a mixture of elected and non-elected members. So some municipal harbour committees have a few independent members from without the political system to provide continuity. It's not something you've done, but it's something that the code recognises. So that's quite onerous expectation on you as a small committee, but there's a lot of advice and guidance out there. And again, I recommend that you make some time to look at this guidance. So there's one example, the Modern Trust Port Guide for Modern Trust Port for Scotland Guide for Good Governance. I guess probably the Secretariat can find these and make them available, Chairman. There's another similar guide for English ports that not directly relevant to you, but I still recommend reading it because it's full of common sense. There are other documents, Port Marine Safety Code we mentioned, and the HSE's approved code of practice for safety in docks. If you really want the detail, is another good and relevant read. Further guidance is available from the Standards Commission Scotland. So this is particularly relevant. It gives advice for members on distinguishing their strategic role and operational work. And a lot of Harbours work is operational. So again, something I would point you to, a good, interesting read. And finally, and I'm not going to read all these out, if you haven't heard of the Nolan Principles of public life, have a Google, look at these slides when you see them later. There's just some good common sense, sensible advice. So, you know, there's support for you as well as expectation on you. And finally, the designated person, that's me. Why am I here? I'm here to provide you with assurance that it's all going well. We've already established that you don't have to be experts, but it is reasonable that you should receive some expert advice about whether it's going well or not. So you've appointed me. I don't have any executive authority, but I do have direct access to you as a committee and to Ben, and if I find something is wrong, I will come and speak to you. So I'm independent, I'm external. I provide that assurance by means of visiting at least once a year, usually twice a year, carrying out audits, receiving reports, talking to people, and just keeping a feel for what's going on and reporting back to you at these meetings. And the final person in the system is the Harbour Master. They're the ones that implement your policy for you. They monitor all aspects of marine safety. They report back to you. They do a whole raft of things, carrying out the risk assessments, creating the procedures, developing emergency plans, staff training, exercises, so on and so forth. A long list that's detailed in your safety management system. And importantly, the Harbour Master is personally vested with powers to direct vessels. So practical example of that would be if you have a vessel coming into your harbour and for some reason you don't want it to come in, maybe there's no berth, maybe there's an emergency happening and you want it the other way, the Harbour Master has the power to turn that vessel around and direct it to go away. That power rests with the Harbour Master. So if you don't have a Harbour Master in place, you can't effectively discharge your powers. So it's really important that you appoint the right person, they have a detailed job description to suit what they're meant to do, and they know how to discharge their powers. Your role as a duty holder is to ensure adequate resources are available to do that. And that's not just money, that's having the right people with the right skills in the right place. So that's it. There's a lot of talking from me. I apologise you hear from me a lot when you do hear from me, but I think it's important. And a reminder to just read that double-page spread in the Port Main Safety Code if you do nothing else.
Thank you, William. That's very informative. And I believe we'll arrange to send a copy of the presentation to the members who haven't been present so they can revise for themselves. So, do any members have any questions? Katie?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks, William. I think it's really important, having been previous chair of the subcommittee. I think it's quite reassuring for members to have you as our independent expert in the room, so to speak. Just two points. One is, and they're both sort of governance, is this, I think the Standards Commission Scotland, I think that would be really useful to pull that out, because I know that in the past members have been quite nervous about what our responsibilities are as individuals, and if there's key stuff there from Standards Commission for elected members, I think sharing that is really important. And the second point is, obviously we have got yourself as a designated person, and the question I would have is, how long have we got you for? Are we, because I appreciate that there's contracts, and I know we've discussed this in the past, but it just would be useful to know, have we got you for a while yet? Or is that, what is the status of your position currently? I think just to update members. Thanks.
Well, it may be bad news because you'll hear more presentations, but we just completed year 1 of a 3-year contract. Yeah.
Thank you. So, on to item 5. Report on Port Marine Safety Code Review Audit undertaken by the designated person. Update report by interim heads of roads and infrastructure. And I've got James McLeod here to assist members with any questions. So I'll open it up to debate.
Sorry, Chair, can I just come in? It sounds like the volume's fine in this room, but we're having a few members struggling to hear online. So can I just ask anyone that's speaking to speak really close to the mic, please, just for the benefit of those on Teams?
Any members have any questions? Councillor Hagman.
Thank you, Chair. If nobody else is going to come in, I will ask on this one. So clearly the review was done, or the audit was done in September 21, and it's an annual one. And I do note in the report that the annual audit will be done following the committee or around about this time. And I'm just wondering, how do we align that better? That, you know, because we're reviewing the audit that's already out of date, so to speak, if we're doing it annually. So is there a better way of working that? Because obviously, you know, there's the actions that are in the document before us, but some of them have been completed, some of them are, you know, they won't be relevant. So it's just in terms of best use of time for us as committee members, because if we don't then get this back till January, we're 18 months out of sync potentially. I'm just wondering if there's a better timeline to do it. And in terms of specific actions, where some of them are continuing, does that mean that they're not complete because they'll never be, you know, so I'm looking at, for example, on page 58, the Marine Safety Management System, and it says it continues to be recommended that the Harbour Watch system be extended to the Macker's Harbours, and the update is we're continuing to operate with checks. So is that complete or is that not complete, or it's going to always be an ongoing one? So it's just how do we get this in the best form going forward? Thank you.
I'll reply, if I may, Joan. So with respect to the timing, I don't wish to make excuses, but things have been difficult staffing-wise in the service this year. It would have been the intention to have done the full audit a bit earlier to align with this meeting. wasn't the case, and I quite understand your point. What I've done, combined with this visit, is a sort of a mini audit with the people that are here. So I spent some time both Stranraer, Kirkcudbright, and passed through the Maccas yesterday. So there will be an update for your next meeting, a much briefer update. With respect to the continuing, probably an apology for me, but that's a sort of a code word I use for, well, I've made this recommendation before. I came back in September 2021 and I'm still seeing the same thing. That particular one you raised, the Maccas reporting, I noticed when I visited yesterday has been taken up now. So I did see, I have an example in my bag here of one of those reports filled in for the Maccas. So that's one that you'll next see says completed. But yes, apologies for my continuing code word.
Yeah, no, that's fine, thank you. And I think we have got one complete, so that's really positive, and appreciate the sort of update, and there's obviously rationale as to why some of these haven't been completed, so I think it's important to note those. But I do think it is also important that for our next meeting, that we can see significant progress. But I appreciate there has been a break because of elections and such things, and noting your point about, if we had other people that weren't elected members on this, but that's obviously a governance standing orders issue that we can choose to look at if we so wish. But thank you.
Thank you. So it's on the record, I'd also like to ask about the regional harbour master situation, just for an update on that, if we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully I'll speak loud enough into this microphone so everybody can hear. We, as a service, are looking to temporarily fill the vacant regional harbour master post, and are undertaking a recruitment process at the moment. That's due to close today, and obviously I'm not able to give any details because I haven't had any, finalisation. But I am hopeful that we should be able to get some additional assistance, and particularly assisting in the closure of a number of the actions contained within the audit report here. So I would hope to be able to provide some further information towards the end of this year to the Harbour Subcommittee through yourself, Chair. And just to pick up on a previous point, if I may, in terms of the continuing, if we take the example that Councillor Hagman referenced, the recommendation on it continues to be recommended the Harbour Watch system be extended to the Maccas Harbours. Yes, when we say we continue to operate this, we have been operating that for a period of time now. So all that I would expect the next audit, so when William does one next year, if he comes in and finds we've stopped doing it, I would expect him to then pick us up for that. But otherwise, I wouldn't expect to see it appearing again. It's something we've put in place properly and recorded properly. But hopefully, as I said, going back to the first point, I would hope to get some additional support, but we'll keep you posted on that.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Any other members, any questions? Nope. Happy to go to the recommendations then. Number 1, note that updates on actions contained within the Port Marine Safety Code compliance audit undertaken by the designated person, William Heaps of Marico Marine, as detailed in Appendix 2. Note that a further audit has been undertaken immediately prior to this subcommittee, and agree to receive further updates on progress within monthly reports and in future meetings of this subcommittee. Happy to agree?
Chair, can I just double check in terms of recommendation 2.2? Is this an interim audit that's taken place, not a full audit, just because we're noting that a further audit has been undertaken? But is this just an interim audit rather than a full audit, just to make that clarity for the minutes?
We've been caught on the hop. I think it's the audit for this year, but it's not in as much detail as previously. And if you'll indulge me, Chair, I think it's only fair to report to you from what I've seen is that operationally, I've been to the 2 biggest harbours, and I'm reassured that I've seen things ticking along quite nicely. There are quite a few more high-level recommendations. not unconnected with the fact that there's a layer of management missing. But I think the committee can be assured that what's happening on the harbours day to day is okay. But I'll give you a fuller report in due course.
Thank you. Right. Item 6, any other business? I don't have any other business. Anything else? No. Item 7, Local Government Scotland Act 1973. Do we agree to adopt a resolution to exclude the public from the meeting in terms of section 50A for paragraph 6 of part 1 of schedule 7A of the Local Government Scotland Act 1973? Happy to agree? Yep. Item 8,